The call came in at 2:41 a.m. Not the kind that sends sirens screaming through city streets, but the kind that unfolds in breathless silence. The dispatcher's voice was calm, trained. The caller's voice was not. Male. Mid-30s. Hysterical. The words barely strung together. She's not waking up. There's blood everywhere. Please, just send someone. When first responders reached the third-floor apartment in Silver Ridge Estates, they found a man pacing shirtless in the hallway. Blood on his hands. Blood on his pants. His voice cracked when he tried to speak. In the living room, a woman, late 20s, light-skinned, still in her work blouse, lay unconscious with a head wound that would require 14 stitches. On the floor beside her, a cast-iron skillet soaked in blood. The man was Marcus Duval, 34, a sous chef at a trendy downtown restaurant. The woman was Jasmine Bright, a legal assistant at a nearby civil rights firm. She was also not his girlfriend. Police cuffed Marcus without hesitation. They didn't care that he begged them to listen. Didn't matter that he kept saying one thing over and over, like a chant or a prayer. I didn't do this. She set me up. Who is she? Trina Langston, his long-term girlfriend. The woman Marcus had been planning to propose to the following weekend. The woman whose name wasn't in the lease, but whose perfume still lingered in the bedroom. Trina was nowhere to be found, and she wouldn't be for a long time. When the sun came up over that quiet Maryland neighborhood, neighbors looked out their blinds, whispering, speculating. That couple always kept to themselves. She was nice, always waved. He was quiet, but polite. No one had heard yelling. No one had seen fighting. Still, as the yellow tape stretched across the breezeway and the news trucks pulled in, people started talking. Little things they'd noticed. Glances. Late-night comings and goings. One neighbor said she hadn't seen Trina in weeks. Another said he'd seen Marcus and Jasmine arguing in the parking lot. The police report was clear. Marcus had a record. Burglary from over a decade ago. He fit the profile. A black man with a past and a weapon in his hand. But nothing about the crime made sense. And what no one knew, not the cops, not the neighbors, not even Jasmine herself, was that the real story was still unraveling. Piece by piece. Lie by lie. Trina had already slipped into the shadows. She didn't call to check on Marcus. She didn't visit him in jail. She didn't return home. Because Trina Langston wasn't mourning. She was on a plane to Atlanta, under a new name, living her second life like the first one had never even happened. And Marcus? He was just starting a nightmare he wouldn't wake up from for years. Silver Ridge Estates wasn't supposed to be the kind of place where crime scenes unfolded. It sat just outside of Baltimore, tucked between leafy cul-de-sacs and modest apartment buildings with faded brick and flower boxes clinging to life. The kind of neighborhood where people nodded at each other in the hallway, but rarely exchanged names. Where porch lights flickered out by 10, and the only noise after dark came from late-night basketball games and the occasional barking dog. This was a black community that took pride in its calm. Most folks were working class or middle income. Postal workers, nurses, teachers. Families chasing peace in a world that rarely gave it. So when the police cruisers pulled up that night, silent at first, then sudden and swarming, the entire complex held its breath. There wasn't screaming. No fire. No gunshots. Just that eerie, hollow quiet that sinks in when something terrible has already happened, and all that's left is the aftermath. By morning, everyone had a version of the story. Mrs. Holloway in 2B said she saw Marcus pacing outside his apartment 2 days earlier, looking haunted. A teenage girl on the third floor swore she saw Trina crying in her car last week, staring at her phone like it held bad news. A delivery guy claimed Marcus had accepted a package for another woman just a few days before the attack. The rumors began to multiply, and fast. Some said Marcus was back on drugs. Others said Jasmine was pregnant. One wild theory suggested Trina had been cheating with Jasmine's brother. None of it confirmed, but in the absence of facts, people filled in the blanks. And the police? They didn't seem in a rush to correct anyone. Marcus Duval was booked at 5:12 a.m. on felony assault with intent to kill. No bond. No attorney yet. Just a torn shirt, bruised wrists, and a look of disbelief on his face like he still thought someone was going to say, "We made a mistake." He asked about Trina. They told him she hadn't made any statements. Hadn't come in. Wasn't listed as a witness. That was the first time it hit him. That something deeper was happening. Something wrong. In the apartment, police logged evidence. A bloodied pan. A cracked iPhone. lipstick on 2 wine glasses, a wig stuffed behind the couch. But the most chilling thing was what wasn't there, Trina's things. Her laptop, her work bag, her favorite red heels, her toothbrush, all gone. Almost like she'd never lived there. Almost like she knew this was coming. Outside, the neighbors watched the apartment from behind blinds and cracked doors, talking in hushed tones, making sure their kids stayed inside. What none of them knew, yet, was this wasn't just a domestic gone wrong. It wasn't just one man's rage or one woman's betrayal. It was a setup, and the one person who could have stopped it walked away clean, smiling. Trina Langston and Marcus Duval were, on the surface, everything the world said they couldn't be. Black, ambitious, and fiercely in love. She worked at a boutique law firm that handled civil cases, mostly discrimination and personal injury. Trina was known for her attention to detail, her poise, the kind of woman who never missed a deadline or let her hair frizz in the rain. Marcus was the comeback story. After serving 3 years for burglary at age 21, he turned his life around. Started from dishwashing, then trained at culinary school, then earned a line cook job that led to his current sous chef position at a downtown fusion spot called Ember and Oak. Together, they looked like redemption, strength, a future worth fighting for. They met at a voter registration event, of all places. She was working the table. He cracked a joke about not trusting politicians. She smiled. He asked for her number. Within months, they moved in together. Trina, with her soft-spoken but assertive presence. Marcus, with his sharp humor and quiet intensity. They made sense. He told her about his past on the 3rd date. She said, "Everyone has one. I care about your present." They cooked together, danced in the kitchen, took weekend trips. When Marcus started putting away money for a ring, he told his mom he was finally ready to build something real. But beneath the curated photos and warm family dinners, the cracks were forming. Slowly, silently, Trina started working late more often. Weekend training out of town. New perfume. New passwords on her phone. She claimed stress. Said the firm was pressuring her, that the new partner was watching her like a hawk. Marcus believed her. Wanted to believe her. Then came the missed birthdays. The fights that started small and flared up into silence. The nights Marcus fell asleep on the couch, waiting. And Jasmine Bright? She came into the picture through Trina. Supposedly a co-worker. But Jasmine and Marcus began talking more often, friendly at first, then oddly intimate. Flirty text threads, late-night calls, innocent coffee meetings that lingered too long. Trina acted unfazed, unbothered, almost like she wanted it to happen. And maybe she did. Maybe she needed Marcus distracted. Maybe she wanted the relationship to implode on its own, so she wouldn't have to burn it down herself. But Jasmine didn't know the full story. And Marcus, tangled between suspicion and guilt, never imagined Trina was playing both of them. By the time the police report was filed, by the time Jasmine was stitched up in the ER and Marcus was processed through intake, Trina was already 6 hours gone. On a train, not a plane. Wearing a different wig. Using a burner phone. Smiling at strangers. The life she'd lived with Marcus was now a shell. An old skin she'd shed. And no one had even started asking why. At first, no one wanted to believe it. Not Marcus's mother, who had always loved Trina like her own. Not Trina's co-workers, who described her as focused and too busy for drama. Not even Jasmine, who despite the blood drying on her blouse, told detectives she wouldn't do this. But stories don't always fall apart with a bang. Sometimes they unravel quietly, bit by bit, in the pauses, in what isn't said. It began with a voicemail. Jasmine's phone, damaged in the scuffle but still salvageable, held a single unheard message from Trina. The timestamp? 40 minutes before the attack. In the recording, Trina's voice was clipped. Cold. "I told you to stop. He doesn't know. You keep pushing this, and someone's going to get hurt. I'm done protecting you." No context. No explanation. Just a chill that lingered. Detectives marked it as ambiguous. But to anyone really listening, it was a warning. Or maybe a threat. Neighbors started remembering things they'd pushed aside. That week, a maintenance worker had entered the unit for a faulty smoke detector and found a wine glass, lipstick-stained, on the bathroom sink. Only one. Not two. And Trina? She'd been gone that day. So who was using her bathroom? Others recalled seeing Trina leave early, in different clothes than she came home in. One even said she'd spotted her walking out of a second building across town, something that didn't make sense unless Trina had another place. And then came the first real break. A subpoenaed toll pass log showing Trina's license plate passing through the Bayview toll station less than an hour after the attack. The direction? Southbound. Away from the hospital. Away from Marcus. It didn't line up. Why hadn't she gone to check on him? Why not answer the police? Why not show up at all? The detective handling the case, Alvarez, started asking tougher questions. He went back through Marcus's texts, pulling old messages. What he found hinted at something darker. Marcus had started asking questions of his own 2 weeks before the incident. Suspicious. Guarded. Messages like, "Why is rent bouncing if I gave you my half? Who the hell is this dude who keeps liking all your pics? You hiding something?" And Trina's replies? Defensive. Deflecting. One stood out more than the rest. "You don't want to start this game. I know more than you think." Still, it wasn't enough for the DA. Not then. They had a weapon, a wounded woman, and a man with a criminal record standing over her, covered in blood. But the whispers were getting louder. Inside the precinct. Inside the neighborhood. Because no one had seen Trina. Not once. Not since that night. And that's when Jasmine finally cracked. She told detectives something she'd been too afraid to say. "Trina told me if I didn't back off, she'd make sure Marcus never saw daylight again." And somehow she meant it. The night of the assault, Jasmine Bright remembered the smell of garlic. Marcus had been cooking, his usual therapy when life got heavy. Shrimp and grits with sautéed kale, a touch of smoked paprika. He wasn't expecting company, just cooking to cook. Jasmine had shown up uninvited. She looked rattled. She told him Trina had threatened her again. That Trina had found out they'd kissed, once months ago, and wouldn't let it go. That she was scared. Marcus told her to sit down. He poured her a glass of wine. Said they'd figure it out. But the moments after that were hazy. She remembered them laughing. Then arguing. Then standing too close. She said they kissed again. Said she pushed him away. Said she needed to leave. The next thing she remembered was the skillet. The flash of pain. Darkness. She never saw who hit her. The police timeline claimed Marcus snapped. Jealousy. Rage. But something was off. No signs of forced entry. No defensive wounds on Jasmine. No blood spatter on Marcus's arms, only his hands and shirt front, like he'd touched her, not attacked her. And that skillet? It wasn't in the kitchen. It had been placed on the living room floor, next to the couch. Next to where Jasmine had fallen. Deliberate. Almost staged. That detail got buried in paperwork. But it stuck with Detective Alvarez. And when the forensics report came back, the blood patterns raised more questions. Jasmine had been struck once. Cleanly. From behind. No signs of a struggle. And she'd fallen backward, not forward. Suggesting the attack came from someone standing behind the couch, not in front of her. Marcus told them he found her that way. That he came out of the bedroom and saw her on the floor. That he panicked, picked her up, tried to wake her. He admitted touching the weapon. Trying to make sense of it. But he didn't run. He called 911. His prints were on the pan, but so were someone else's. Partial. Smudged. But feminine. Still no match in the system. And Trina? Trina had vanished like a shadow at sunrise. The apartment's lease was only in Marcus's name. The utilities too. Trina had always insisted it made things simpler, if they ever broke up. Cameras in the complex caught only one angle of their front door. No sign of her that night. But when Alvarez pulled surveillance from a gas station 2 blocks away, he found it. Trina. Alone. Calm. Holding a small duffel bag. Walking like she had all the time in the world. She bought a Coke. A pack of gum. Paid in cash. Smiled at the clerk. She left at 12:53 a.m. The attack happened around 1:20. That meant she was still nearby when it happened. Maybe even watching. And now, her absence wasn't just suspicious. It was damning. Because if she was innocent, why did she leave everything behind? The news broke fast, and it broke ugly. Man arrested in brutal attack of legal assistant, the headlines read. Repeat offender back behind bars. They printed Marcus's mugshot, the one where his lip was swollen from crying, not fighting. They mentioned his old burglary charge from 2009, but left out the part about how he was 19, and had taken a plea deal for a crime he didn't commit, just to avoid a longer sentence. They painted him like a ticking time bomb. Angry. Dangerous. Predictable. And Trina? She wasn't mentioned. Not once. The neighborhood split, like a cracked mirror. Some people clung to the version they were handed. That Marcus was another man who couldn't control his temper, who turned violent when he couldn't have what he wanted. Others, especially those who knew him well, started asking questions. Why hadn't Trina come forward? Why wasn't she showing up to clear things up? Why did it feel like she had evaporated? One of Trina's closest friends, Aisha, started digging. She called the law firm where Trina worked. Except, they said Trina hadn't shown up in over 2 weeks. And when Aisha pressed, the woman on the phone paused and said something odd. Actually, we were under the impression she was taking some kind of leave. Didn't she have a family emergency? No, she didn't. That was the first real crack. Then came the next. Marcus's cousin, Darnell, showed up to visit him in jail. Said someone had been trying to access Marcus's bank account online. Multiple failed login attempts. Darnell had the alerts forwarded to Marcus's backup email. The IP address? Logged from a hotel Wi-Fi in Virginia Beach. That hotel had a guest registered under the name Katrina L. Marsh. The photo ID used matched Trina's birthday and height, but the name was fake. Now, the police were forced to pay attention. Detective Alvarez filed a missing persons request. Not to find Trina, but to track her. If she wasn't going to come in willingly, they'd find her another way. Meanwhile, Marcus sat in a cell. Alone. Confused. Angry. Hurt. He still couldn't process it. The woman he loved, who he'd trusted with everything, was gone. And worse? She left him to rot in her place. He wasn't eating. Barely sleeping. Writing letters to Trina that would never be sent. He kept asking over and over, why wouldn't she just tell the truth? And nobody had an answer. What the police had was circumstantial. What the DA had was a wounded woman and a man with priors. That was enough for them to press charges. No one cared about the missing woman. Because the system wasn't built to believe men like Marcus. Especially not when the woman in question played the role so well, quiet, educated, professional. The perfect ghost. And all the while, Trina was watching. From behind new lashes, in a new city, under a new name. Living like none of it had ever happened. If you're finding this story meaningful, we'd be grateful if you subscribe. Thank you. Because the deeper we go, the more truth we uncover. And this story? It's just getting started. When Alvarez got the warrant to pull Trina's digital trail, what surfaced was far from what anyone expected. She wasn't just hiding. She'd been planning. The emails came first. Hundreds of them. 2 separate Gmail accounts, one under her real name, the other under a fake identity she used for months. That second inbox opened a door. Hotel confirmations under aliases. Rental car agreements. Cash app transfers to a K. Marsh. Online shopping orders for 2 different wardrobes. One polished and professional. The other flashy, fitted, southern. She wasn't living a double life by accident. It was intentional. Layered. Dangerous. Even her dating profiles were split. On one, she was Trina, 31, paralegal, single, not looking for anything serious. On the other, Katrina, 32, retired model, divorced, open to adventure. 2 phone numbers. 2 entire online footprints. Separate playlists. Separate banking apps. She had crafted 2 identities and kept them from colliding, until they did. The surveillance footage from the train station in D.C. put the final nail in it. For hours after Marcus was arrested, Trina was seen boarding a southbound train wearing oversized sunglasses, a bob wig, and carrying a leopard print duffel. She looked calm, composed. No panic. No hesitation. Like someone on vacation. Investigators traced her to Norfolk first, then Atlanta. She was moving just fast enough to stay a step ahead. But there was more. The biggest discovery came from Marcus's financial records. Over the past 6 months, large sums of money, 300 here, 700 there, had disappeared from his account. He thought it was bills. Emergency expenses. Turns out it was Trina. Transferring it into a shadow account she created under Marcus's name. Forged signature. Fake ID. She was cleaning him out behind his back. Why? Because Marcus had recently landed a promotion. A raise. He had plans. He'd told her about a potential investment opportunity, partnering in a new restaurant venture. She'd smiled. Nodded. Then she started draining the account. That was the money motive. But the emotional motive? Fear. Shame. Control. According to texts Alvarez uncovered between Trina and an unnamed contact saved as P, Trina had been in a situation before Marcus. One she never spoke of. A man. Someone abusive, maybe. Or someone who knew too much. It wasn't fully clear. But what was clear was this. Trina had been running from something long before Jasmine got hurt. And when it looked like Marcus was about to catch on, about the money, about the fake accounts, about the lies, she didn't just run. She lit a match behind her and let him burn. The most disturbing part? She had practice. This wasn't the first time she'd disappeared. There was an old police report from 5 years earlier. Different state, different name. Another man who filed a complaint that his girlfriend had stolen thousands before vanishing. Same story, same method. It had just never stuck. Until now. By the time Detective Alvarez sat back and looked at the full picture, he realized something terrifying. Trina Langston hadn't just walked out of Marcus's life. She'd engineered his collapse, carefully, methodically, like it was part of a blueprint. What she left behind wasn't just a broken man or a bleeding woman. It was a system set up to fail someone like Marcus from the beginning. And she knew it. That's what made it cruel. Calculated. She weaponized what people would assume about him. The record. The temper. The race. It wasn't just about escaping. It was about erasing. She played the victim before she even disappeared. Quietly seeding doubt, long before Jasmine ever stepped foot into their apartment. Neighbors remembered it differently now. One recalled Trina telling her in the laundry room that Marcus was slipping again and might need help. Another said she'd overheard a phone call where Trina cried, saying, "I don't feel safe anymore." Subtle. Soft-spoken. Nothing ever enough to file a report, but enough to plant a seed. By the time the attack happened, people already had the narrative halfway built. She didn't have to frame Marcus with blood. She'd already framed him with fear. And it worked. Even Jasmine had doubts at first. She wanted to believe it was a mistake, that Marcus just panicked. But as she healed, both physically and emotionally, things started clicking into place. A week before the attack, she remembered Trina showing up unannounced at her job. Calm. Ice cold. She didn't yell. Didn't threaten. Just stood there and said, "You're not built for what's coming." At the time, it felt like jealousy. In hindsight, it was a warning. Trina wasn't just a woman scorned. She was orchestrating an exit. And that second apartment? It wasn't a theory anymore. Alvarez tracked a lease in Capitol Heights, signed under the name Katrina Marsh. Prepaid rent. No utilities in her name. Inside, they found a few dresses, some wigs, and an old laptop. The browser history was a roadmap, searches for how to fake a disappearance, can you be charged for false testimony, and emotional abuse claims with no evidence. But the most disturbing find? A document titled Plan B. Inside were notes. Not a confession. Not quite. More like options. Blame Jasmine if it goes sideways. Marcus will take the fall. He's too proud to beg. Disappear, let heat cool, resurface as K. This wasn't panic. This was preparation. And now, Alvarez had a real case. But the DA wasn't eager to play along. Without direct evidence tying Trina to the weapon or the assault, they hesitated. She hadn't technically done anything yet, just lied, manipulated, and disappeared. The legal system could feel Trina's fingerprints all over this. But fingerprints aren't charges. Not yet. And Trina? She was thriving. A new job. A new boyfriend. Smiling in selfies under a new name, in a new state. It was the perfect con. Because justice doesn't chase people like her. It buries people like Marcus. Everyone wanted to know the same thing. Why did she do it? How could a woman like Trina, poised, educated, stable, throw away a life so carefully built? Why destroy Marcus, a man who had stood by her, cleaned up his act, fought to be better? Why leave Jasmine bleeding and confused? Why vanish instead of confront? The answer was never just one thing. It never is. You had to go back. Before the perfect couple photos. Before the law firm job. Before Marcus. Back to Trina's past, a past she never shared. Detective Alvarez managed to get her college records, then traced her movements year by year. What he found explained more than anyone expected. Trina had a sealed court file from when she was 22. Domestic violence complaint, she was the one who filed it. The accused? A man named Brian Riddick. Older. Controlling. Allegedly violent. But the charges were dropped. The file sealed. Trina left the state 2 weeks later and never looked back. No social media for 3 years. No job under her name. No paper trail. Then suddenly she reappeared. New city. New look. New resume. That wasn't recovery. That was reinvention. And that trauma? It didn't just scar her. It shaped her. People who knew her from those early years said she changed after Brian. Became more guarded. Calculating. protective of her space, and obsessive about control. She built relationships like insurance plans. Men were tools or threats, sometimes both. And Marcus? He was supposed to be the safe one, the redemption arc, the kind one, the man who cooked dinner and paid bills and loved without keeping score. But when he started asking questions about the money, the apartment, the mood swings, Trina saw him differently. Not as a partner, as a liability. And she couldn't allow herself to be vulnerable again. Not like before. So she did what she knew how to do. She took back control. By any means necessary. She nudged Jasmine and Marcus closer, watched as they drifted. Maybe even encouraged it. And when things started to fray, she slipped into the background, let them implode, and pulled the pin from the grenade. The night Jasmine was attacked, Trina didn't panic. She executed a plan. Whether she struck the blow herself or manipulated someone else into doing it, that's the piece still missing. But what's clear is this: she set it up. She walked out of that apartment knowing what Marcus would look like when the cops arrived. Knowing what his record would say. Knowing no one would question the version where he snapped. Because she'd written that version. And the tragedy? Marcus still loved her. Even behind bars, he couldn't bring himself to believe it. Not fully. She's not like that, he kept saying. But she was. She had to be. Because people don't disappear on accident. They disappear when it's safer than staying. And for Trina Langston, the truth wasn't just inconvenient. It was a threat. The tip came from a motel clerk in Augusta, Georgia. Said he recognized the woman on the flyer, claimed she checked in every other weekend, always paid in cash, used the name Keisha. Said she wore wigs, changed them often, and always asked for a room farthest from the lobby. He also said something else. She was never alone. The man she showed up with wasn't Marcus. Wasn't Brian either. He was someone new. Young. Flashy. Gold chain, loud laugh. Drove a silver BMW with dealer tags and Georgia plates. When Alvarez ran the surveillance footage, there was no mistaking her. Trina. Hair in long braids this time. Leopard print suitcase. Big sunglasses at night. That clip would be the last footage the police would get before she vanished again. But it was enough. The trail was heating up. Meanwhile, Marcus had spent 4 months in pretrial detention. 4 birthdays had passed, his mother's, his godson's, and Jasmine's. He missed every one. No visitors from Trina. No statement from her to police. Not even a lawyer filing on his behalf. It was like she'd never existed. And the legal system was stalling. The DA still wouldn't drop the charges. Said the evidence was still under evaluation. Translation? They had nothing new, but didn't want to admit it. Then came the break. A whistleblower from inside the courthouse, an assistant clerk, leaked something to Alvarez. An unsigned statement had been placed in a file the night before Marcus's bond hearing. A typed letter. No header. No signature. But the contents? Chilling. It read, "The man in custody did not harm Jasmine. He found her that way. I used her to hurt him. He didn't deserve it, but I couldn't let him expose me. If you look in the trunk of the black Honda, you'll find what you need." That car, the black Honda, had been impounded weeks earlier. Belonged to Marcus. Alvarez had never been given a full inventory of it. When they opened the trunk, beneath the spare tire, they found an envelope. Inside, photos, bank statements, and a flash drive. The photos were from a hidden camera Marcus had set up in the apartment weeks before, trying to catch whoever was stealing from him. The footage wasn't crystal clear, but it showed Trina taking cash from his drawer, using his laptop, and, on the night of the assault, walking out of the apartment less than 2 minutes before Marcus called 911. The timestamp was unshakable. But even with this, the DA hesitated. Too many unknowns. So Alvarez did something risky. He leaked the story to the press. The footage. The whistleblower letter. The money trail. The public flipped. Social media caught fire. The hashtag #FreeMarcusDuval trended for 2 days straight. Jasmine, seeing the uproar, gave a full statement to reporters. "I was used. Marcus didn't do this. He saved me." And just like that, the narrative cracked. But Trina, she was still gone. Still 2 steps ahead. Still watching from somewhere out of reach. And what came next would shift everything, again. 3 months later, on a gray, wind-lashed morning in Chesapeake Bay, a fisherman spotted something caught on the rocks. At first, he thought it was driftwood. Then he saw the shoe. The body was badly decomposed. Female. Medium height. Braids still clinging to her scalp. The press went wild before the coroner even made a statement. Everyone assumed it was Trina. She'd finally been found. Dead. Maybe guilt had caught up. Maybe she ran from the wrong person. Maybe Marcus would finally be free. But the autopsy changed everything. The body wasn't hers. No match on fingerprints. No dental records that lined up. No surgical scars like the ones Trina had documented during a past ER visit. And the estimated time of death. 6 months before the assault. The dead woman was someone else. Still unidentified. Still another mystery. But that discovery shifted the story again. Because if that wasn't Trina, the question turned sharper. Where was she now? And what was she planning next? The false hope of her death sparked something in Marcus. Not relief. Not grief. Rage. He'd spent over 220 days behind bars for a crime he didn't commit. His reputation, career, and savings were shattered. And Trina? She was still out there. Still breathing. Still slipping through cracks. That night, Marcus wrote a letter. Not to Trina. Not to Alvarez. To the world. He called it, "She Let Me Rot." In it, he detailed everything. The manipulation. The slow unraveling of his relationship. The betrayal. He described the sound of Jasmine's body hitting the floor. The panic. The way no one believed him, even when he stood right there, saying, "I didn't do it." The letter went viral. People shared it in schools, on TikTok, in group chats. It sparked think pieces. Podcasts. A national debate. How many people were sitting in cells because someone else told a better story? How many Trinas had never been caught? Then came the biggest shock of all. A tip from a bus driver in Atlanta. Said he'd seen a woman matching Trina's description every Tuesday morning. Always with a book. Always wearing oversized sunglasses. She sat in the back. Alone. Alvarez coordinated with a private investigator and set up a stakeout. 2 weeks passed. Nothing. Week 3? There she was. Wearing denim, boots, and a wide-brimmed hat. A calm sway to her walk. She looked rested. Content. The PI followed her to a 2-bedroom apartment in the West End. The name on the lease? Kimberly Marsh. But the photo ID used matched Trina's DMV records, altered by only 1 digit in the birthday. It was her. She was alive. And now she was cornered. Alvarez made the call. Bring her in. But when they knocked, no answer. The apartment was empty. Neatly packed. Recently cleaned. She was gone. Again. And on the kitchen counter a note. 1 line. You almost had me. When Trina was finally caught, it wasn't at a border, or at an airport, or even during a high-speed chase. It was at a nail salon. A small, tucked-away spot in Macon, Georgia. She was sitting beneath a lavender dryer, reading Essence, chatting about gel polish with the woman next to her. She didn't run. Didn't flinch when the U.S. Marshals walked in. She just sighed, closed the magazine, and said, "Guess that's it then." Back in Baltimore, the news lit up like a firestorm. Trina Langston captured after 11-month manhunt. The headlines had finally caught up to the truth. The courtroom was packed when she arrived, wrists cuffed, head high. Her skin glowed. Hair freshly done. No signs of fear, just the quiet chill of a woman who thought she was still smarter than everyone in the room. Marcus sat across the aisle, free now but haunted. He didn't look at her, not once. Not when she entered. Not during the hearing. Not even when she glanced at him with that same unreadable expression he used to mistake for love. The prosecution brought everything. The surveillance, the emails, the forged accounts, the fake name, the photos, the Plan B document, Jasmine's testimony. But Trina had her own playbook. Her defense? She was the victim. She claimed Marcus had been controlling. That she feared retaliation if she came forward. That she never hurt Jasmine and never meant for Marcus to be arrested. That her fleeing was a trauma response, not guilt. And then, the twist no one expected. Trina flipped the script. She claimed Jasmine had hit herself in a jealous rage. That she tried to frame Trina because they were both obsessed with the same man. The gallery gasped. Jasmine stood up and yelled before being escorted out. The judge silenced the room. Then Trina doubled down. She said the Plan B document wasn't hers. Claimed it was Marcus's, planted to frame her. Said he was manipulating the narrative to flip public opinion. That she disappeared because she didn't trust the system to protect her. That Marcus had spun a redemption arc around himself, while she was the real victim all along. It was chaos. The jury sat stiff, eyes flicking from one side to the other. And then a bombshell email came in, entered into evidence late. From Trina to P. Subject line, "It's done. Now let him rot." Timestamped 2 hours after the assault. It was cold. Final. Impossible to refute. The courtroom went silent. One juror covered her mouth. Another clenched his jaw. But still a hung jury loomed. Two jurors refused to convict on the felony obstruction charge. Said it wasn't clear enough. The DA offered a plea deal. Trina took it. 4 years for identity fraud, obstruction of justice, and theft by deception. No assault charge. No attempted murder. She'd be out in 2 with good behavior. Marcus was stunned. Jasmine was furious. The community felt cheated. Justice hadn't been served. Just measured. Because Trina didn't lose. Not really. She kept her secrets. She spun her story. And in the end, she walked out with less time than Marcus had already spent waiting. The courtroom was supposed to be the ending. For Marcus, it was supposed to be closure. For Jasmine, it was supposed to be justice. For the community, a chance to believe that truth still mattered. But what happened instead felt like something darker. A reset, not a reckoning. After the plea deal, people were divided. Some believed Trina had outsmarted the system. Others saw her as a woman who'd played too close to fire and got singed. But no one could agree on whether she was evil or just desperate. And then came the civil case. Marcus filed a personal suit, wrongful imprisonment, defamation, financial theft. His lawyers presented everything. Emails, texts, stolen funds, the forged bank account. All of it tied directly to Trina. They had the paper trail. They had motive. They even had her digital confession, the email to P. This was where truth had a chance to breathe. But during depositions, Trina turned on everyone. She said Jasmine seduced Marcus to ruin their relationship. That Marcus created the fake identity to trap her. That the Plan B document was fabricated. That she never sent the email, claimed it was planted by Alvarez to make his case more salacious. She was relentless, composed, never angry, always on the edge of believable. Until the last witness was called. An IT expert, someone Alvarez had hired during the original investigation. He traced Trina's IP activity, login timestamps, digital fingerprints. Brought hard evidence into the light. Not just about the money, but about Trina's entire operation. Every switch between her identities. Every burner phone registered under fake names. Every time she checked on Marcus's social media from hidden accounts. Even a browser tab opened 3 days after the assault titled, "How long does attempted murder carry if no one dies?" The courtroom froze. Her attorney asked for a recess. But the jury had seen enough. The verdict came back 2 days later. Marcus was awarded $278,000 in damages. Not enough to repay what he lost. Not even close. But it was something. Still, the most dramatic moment came not from the judge or the lawyers, but from Trina herself. As she was escorted out of court, reporters shouted questions. One called out, "Trina, do you have anything to say to Marcus?" She paused, turned her head, and with the same cold smile she wore the night she vanished, she said, "He should have minded his business." That clip went viral. Over 5 million views in 3 days. Comment sections exploded. People debated morality, manipulation, race, gender, trauma, and power. Some said Trina was a narcissist. Others said she was a survivor. Some called Marcus a fool for ever loving her. Others said he was a symbol of what happens when justice gets tangled in perception. But the truth? It was more complicated than any headline. Because by then, Marcus wasn't angry anymore. He was tired. Of explaining. Of defending. Of reliving the worst nights of his life, just to prove he hadn't earned them. Trina didn't break him. But she left scars deeper than any sentence could reach. And in the court of public opinion, where truth competes with entertainment, she walked away the way she always did. With a story she got to write. After the verdict, the cameras moved on. The headlines faded, pushed aside by the next outrage, the next scandal. The world turned the page. But for the people at the center of it, Marcus, Jasmine, the families, there was no neat ending. Marcus was free, technically. But his job at Ember and Oak had long been filled. The dream of owning his own spot. Gone. Investors had pulled out months earlier, scared off by the bad press. Even with the civil settlement, Marcus was struggling. He moved back in with his mother. Took a job at a food truck. Showed up to therapy twice a week, and stopped checking his social media after someone sent him a DM saying, "Bet you really did it though." Freedom came with a price. The world hadn't unlearned its suspicion, just because the facts changed. And Jasmine? She tried to rebuild too. She left the law firm, couldn't stand the pity in everyone's eyes. Started working at a nonprofit for survivors of emotional abuse. Still jumped at loud noises. Still kept her doors double-locked. Still wondered how long Trina had been watching her before she struck. But she wasn't broken. Just reshaped. Stronger, in a quiet kind of way. Trina's sister, Kendra, hadn't spoken publicly since the trial. But privately, she sent Marcus a letter. It was short. Just a paragraph. It read, "I don't know what she became. I only know who she used to be. I'm sorry she hurt you. I'm sorry we didn't see it." Marcus didn't write back. There was nothing left to say. The community, once buzzing with suspicion and whispers, settled into something more solemn. Silver Ridge estates never fully healed. Too many people had stayed silent. Too many had assumed the worst. Some tried to apologize. Others just stayed out of Marcus's way. But every so often, someone would leave something on his porch. A hot meal. A folded note. A prayer card. Small offerings to a man they didn't protect when it mattered. And Trina? She served 23 months. Was released quietly. No press. No coverage. Just a woman with a new haircut and a sealed record walking into a future she didn't deserve. Rumors say she moved out west. That she's using a new name now. That she works under the table, keeps her head down. But knowing her, she's probably writing another story already. The thing about people like Trina is, they don't vanish. They adapt. They wait. They choose when to be seen. And justice? It never quite caught up. Because even when the system did work, when the evidence was overwhelming, the facts undeniable, and the court leaned the right way, it still couldn't fix what had been broken. It couldn't give Marcus those lost months. It couldn't undo the night Jasmine bled on the floor. It couldn't teach a neighborhood not to doubt its own. Justice was messy, incomplete, but it was all they had. There's something people don't talk about enough in stories like this. Not the lies, not the crime, not even the verdict, but the silence that follows. What happens after the headlines fade? After the cameras leave? After the world stops watching? Marcus Duval lives in that silence now. He wakes up early, cooks breakfast for his mom, sometimes walks by the bay before work, headphones in, the noise of the world tuned out. He keeps his head down, not because he's ashamed, but because the weight of being seen too late still lingers. He told a friend once, "You know what hurt the most? Not that she set me up, but that nobody questioned it. That's the part that stuck." How fast the world believed the worst version of him. How slow it was to believe the truth. He doesn't post online anymore. Doesn't talk about Trina unless asked. But when he does, there's no fire in his voice. No revenge. Just distance. Like she's a storm he survived. Because that's what she was. A quiet, calculated storm. And Jasmine? She visits schools now. Talks to young women about emotional manipulation. About red flags that don't show up as bruises. She doesn't name Trina. Doesn't have to. The story tells itself. The bruises faded. The trust hasn't. And still, somewhere out there, Trina walks freely. Maybe she's watching this video. Maybe she's under a new name again. New job. New city. New man. Because that's what she does. She disappears, and the people left behind are the ones who clean up the damage. She let Marcus rot in a cell. While she shopped. Smiled. Slept soundly. That's not just betrayal. That's erasure. And the scariest part? She did it without lifting a hand. Just with words. With silence. With a system that handed her a pen and told her, "Write the truth however you want." There are no villains in fairy tales anymore. Just people who know how to smile at the right moment, cry on cue, and stay just clean enough to be believed. This story wasn't about a perfect man or a perfect victim. It was about power, and who gets believed when everything burns down. So if you're still here, still listening, remember this. Not all monsters look like monsters. And not every survivor wears scars on the outside. Every story has two sides, but the truth waits in the shadows. Join us as we uncover the hidden truths, the unspoken betrayals, and the moments that define survival. Subscribe now to follow every twist and turn, because in the world of true crime, justice is just the beginning.